Today we're going to talk about when one headlight doesn't work in your Trailblazer. First things first, if both aren't working, this does not apply. You should watch the other video where we talk about the low beam relay. Some people have their own approach. Some people just go out and buy a new bulb and put it in, and that's cool. That's what works for you. I don't just throw a bulb in. I do testing first. I always test stuff. So the first thing I want to do, I want to get to the low beam headlight connector. Some people, they can reach their hand down in here and change the bulb, and that's great. That doesn't work for me. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the grill. The headlights on these, at least on the Trailblazer, it's got two clips. Shove a little bar in there and pop him out of place. You've got another one tucked way back in there. Just get that guy out of place. Since I want to leave everything plugged in, I'm just going to throw a little towel over here. So a quick overview. Your cornering bulb has its own socket. Your turn signal / parking light has its own socket. And then the big one is for your high beam and low beam. So we're going to leave that plugged in. I'm going to take off the little boot here for the low beam bulb. Rotate that guy out of place. Just pull back on this little tab right here. Get that bulb out of there. Now this is the point where you guys at home can just throw your bulb in or whatever and see if it works, but we're not going to go that route. So I've got my meter out. I've got the headlight switched on. I've got this thing plugged in. So I'm going to take the leads in my meter. From the back side of the connector, where the white wire goes, you want to put the black lead. Where the orange wire goes, you want to put the red lead. I'm sitting right, well, close to battery voltage, over 12 volts. So that tells me I have power and ground here at the connector. I'd probably put a new bulb in, but let's test the old one first just to make sure. I'm looking at the bulb here. There's nothing rattling around inside. And it looks okay. But let's set the meter to ohms and touch each of these pins in here. So one would touch one pin and the other would touch the other. And if you look at the meter, we've got no continuity through the bulb. So yeah, it's done. I've got a new bulb here and I'm going to do the same test. And as you can see, we have continuity through the bulb. So really, if I just plug this in right now, it should just fire right up. And it does. Is it the long way of doing it? Sure. But at least I know before I replace any parts what the problem probably is. Now let's assume that we did the same thing. We've got the headlight switch on, we've got this connector plugged in, we're back probing the low beam connector, and we have 0 volts on our multi. What do you do now? Obviously replacing the bulb isn't going to fix it. You don't have power there. Well, you have either one of two things that are missing. It's either going to be the ground wire to the bulb or the power wire to the bulb. I'm going to hook the red lead of my meter up to the positive battery. With the black lead, I'm going to back probe the white wire in the connector. And it's showing close to battery voltage. So it's pretty safe to say that the ground is good. Now I've got the black lead of my meter hooked up to the negative battery. I'm going to back probe the orange wire with the red lead of the meter. So in this scenario, headlights are on, this is plugged in, and on the orange wire, I don't have battery voltage. Looking at the diagram, let's see how it works. Here's our right low beam. Here's our orange wire. Comes out of that connector right there on the tan and white wire, and it runs all the way up to this front fuse block right here. Right there. So obviously you would want to test low headlamp right fuse number 3. So let's test that then. As you might have noticed from the both headlights not working video, only with the headlamp switch on will you have power through these two fuses. This is for the right low beam, this is for the left. So let's probe this one on the right low beam. We have battery voltage or close to it. Now let's probe this side. and I've got nothing there. Tells me the fuse is bad. Sure enough, have a new fuse. Let's do the same test as before. This side of the fuse we're at battery voltage, again with the headlights on. And on the other side we're also at battery voltage. So if I go over here and back probe the orange connector, we're at battery voltage. It means when I plug the bulb in, it should turn on now. There you have it. If you didn't have battery voltage at the orange wire, well then you would take your T-pin and go back behind the tan and white wire, see if that has battery voltage. If it has it here, but it doesn't have it at the orange wire, then you know you've got a break in the orange wire in between here through the headlight itself and to this connector. My alternative, I run a new wire outside and then through the rubber cover. It's better than replacing a whole headlight. If you didn't have it here, but you had it at fuse 3, then you've got a break in the wire between here, all the way up through the vehicle wiring and up to fuse 3. If you put in the fuse and it blows right away, then you've probably got a short in that wire in between the fuse block and this connector right here. I really can't cover all that stuff in one headlight video, because after all, it's probably just the bulb that's out. Well, I'm sitting here watching this video and I just realized that I never talked about what happened if you did not have a ground at the white wire in the headlight connector. You would pretty much do the same steps that you did for the orange wire. You would go back from that white wire in the connector, then you would check the big 4-pin connector at the headlight, and then you'll follow the ground back to where it splices in. I kind of talk about how the low beam and the high beam ground wires are spliced together several inches back down in that harness. I fucked up. The ground wire could be broken inside the headlight itself, or it can be broken from the connector back somewhere. Both of these black leads, they're both grounds for each headlight bulb. So one does the low beam, one does the high beam. The ground wires go through this harness, and somewhere back in there, they're pretty much just tied together. And I think the ground for it is like this bolt right here. So if I didn't have a ground at the white wire, but I had it here, I would run my own ground outside and into the bulb connector itself. I'd bypass all this. This is like 18 gauge shitty wire. So what have we learned today? Well, we've learned how to do the basic checks on the low beam headlight bulb connector. We've learned the circuits, and we've learned what you can do before you even replace anything. So, I'm satisfied. The procedures that you saw are the exact same for the other headlight. What you're going to find in the driver's side low beam, you're still going to have your orange positive and a white ground. Everything's still the same there. The difference is going to be this wire here that you would back probe for the 12 volt test is now yellow, whereas it was tan and white on the passenger side. This is your ground for that low beam. And when you're doing the test from the fuse, I mentioned it earlier, but I'll mention it again, you're going to be testing fuse number 6 for the driver's side. Probably the most frequent thing I get here is lights not working. Face it, they're on all the time. Daytime, they're on for daytime running lights and auto lights and nighttime. Well, one more thing worth mentioning here is putting this thing back into place. You can see it's pretty easy. We've got the 2 sliding pins, but sometimes they can be a little bitch to move. You spray some penetrating oil down into there and down into here, and sometimes it helps. See? That one's going to be okay. So, sometimes it could be a pain. I'd say that 5% of the time I see the headlight socket melted. Based on information from a lot of people who are a lot smarter than me, it seems that it's the daytime running lights which actually causes that. And I have ways for modifying the daytime running lights so that they don't do that anymore, but that's going to be in an upcoming video. So if you like Trailblazer stuff, you have a Trailblazer, needs a lot of work, subscribe to my shit. Well, casualty of war, I guess. I really didn't plan on removing this thing a billion times, and the cover got caught on here and it ripped all the mounting tabs off. So I'm gonna roll a little ghetto now with the zip tie on it. I got mustard in my finger. Are you recording this?
Yeah.
Well, that thing from Sonic had like a ton of mustard in it. But anyway, there's a little bee on there. Fuck you, bee.